Snow White.
Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a beautiful princess named Snow White. Her skin was as white as snow, her lips as red as blood, and her hair as black as ebony. She was kind and gentle, and everyone in the kingdom adored her, everyone, except her stepmother, the queen. The queen was a vain and cruel woman, obsessed with her own beauty. She possessed a magical mirror that she would consult every day, asking, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror always replied, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." However, one day the mirror gave a different answer. "My queen, you are fair, 'tis true, but Snow White is fairer than you." Filled with jealousy and rage, the queen decided to rid herself of Snow White. She called for her huntsman and commanded him to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. As proof, she demanded that he bring back Snow White's heart. The huntsman, unable to harm the innocent princess, took her deep into the forest, but couldn't go through with the deed. He fell to his knees, confessing the queen's plot and urging Snow White to run away and never return. Grateful and terrified, Snow White fled into the heart of the forest. After wandering for hours, Snow White stumbled upon a small, quaint cottage. Exhausted, she entered and found it empty, though it appeared to be inhabited by 7 little people. Too tired to investigate further, she fell asleep across 3 of the small beds. When the inhabitants returned 7 dwarfs who worked in the nearby mines, they were shocked to find the beautiful princess asleep in their home. When Snow White awoke, she told them her story, and the dwarfs, moved by her plight, offered her refuge. Snow White gratefully accepted and began living with them, keeping their home tidy and cooking their meals. Back at the palace, the queen once again asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" To her horror, the mirror replied, "Snow White, who dwells with the 7 dwarfs, is the fairest of them all." Enraged, the queen devised a series of wicked plans to kill Snow White first. She disguised herself as an old peddler woman and went to the dwarf's cottage, offering Snow White a laced bodice. When Snow White tried it on, the queen pulled the laces so tight that Snow White couldn't breathe and fell unconscious. However, the dwarfs arrived just in time to loosen the laces and revive her. Next, the queen returned disguised as a different old woman and offered Snow White a poisoned comb. When Snow White used it, she fell into a death-like sleep, but once again the dwarfs saved her by removing the comb. Finally, the queen crafted a poisoned apple. Disguised as a peasant woman, she offered the apple to Snow White. This time, Snow White hesitated, but the queen convinced her by taking a bite from the unpoisoned side. Trusting her, Snow White took a bite and immediately fell into a deep, death-like sleep. When the dwarfs found her, they were heartbroken. Unable to bury her in the ground, they placed her in a glass coffin in the forest where they kept watch over her. Time passed, and one day a prince from a neighboring kingdom happened upon the forest. While hunting, he saw Snow White in her glass coffin and was struck by her beauty. He asked the dwarfs about her and, moved by their story, requested to take her to his castle where she could be properly honored. As the dwarfs and the prince's servants lifted the coffin, they stumbled, dislodging the piece of poisoned apple from Snow White's throat. Miraculously, she awoke. The prince, overjoyed, declared his love for her, and Snow White, grateful and smitten, agreed to marry him. The prince and Snow White returned to his kingdom, where they were married in a grand celebration. The wicked queen, upon learning of Snow White's survival and happiness, flew into such a rage that she destroyed her own magical mirror and, some say, disappeared forever. Snow White and her prince ruled the kingdom with kindness and wisdom, and they lived happily ever after, never forgetting the brave little dwarfs who had saved her life. Thank you for watching.